All right. Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. Today, we're going to continue on with some of our coverage of the crisis of the horror in Palestine and in Gaza. Over the last several weeks, over the last couple of months, really, we've done a coverage of all kinds of different stories coming out of Palestine and Gaza, some of the atrocities, the crimes against humanity, the different ways in which Israel is implementing apartheid and genocide. With the focus really on the human cost and the death toll and things like that. Some of the more egregious and in-your-face examples that make this quite clearly a genocide, right? We're going to be going on with that trend, but today we're going to be taking a more cultural look. We're going to highlight or put a lens on the ways in which Palestinian culture, Palestinian way of life is under siege by this Israeli genocide, right? We have several different articles today, and we're going to go at this from a few different angles. We're going to be hopping into the recent story of Israel bulldozing and desecrating Palestinian cemeteries and other religious sites, because that's been more relevant or contemporary in the news cycle recently. And then we're going to be discussing something I'm sure you guys are all aware of, but the destruction of Palestinian schools and universities. We're going to put a little highlight on that. And then we're going to round off this video by talking about how Israel is causing or perpetuating a cultural genocide with the deliberate targeting and murder of all kinds of different artists, right? So several different angles on the cultural front of how Palestine is under siege by Zionists, right? So let's go ahead and jump into our source material here, guys. Try to clip through this quickly. This one is surprisingly from CNN, which actually left me a little shook. And just, going with this, it's interesting to me because, once you start getting... Obviously, we're seeing a lot of different things happen right now where it's becoming more and more difficult for different institutions and power players to deny that this is a genocide, or at least to deny that this is disproportionate violence, disproportionate amounts of crimes against humanity for any conflict, right? And I think we're starting to see slowly, and this may change, mainstream media outlets like CNN begin to gradually shift the narrative. And there's a lot of elements here as to why that may be. Obviously blowback from the public. Maybe viewership is down surrounding this conflict because, public opinion shows that people don't buy into the mainstream media narratives around this, obviously. But then also there could be an element or perspective of this that, we do know that the Biden administration, despite having unequivocal support for Netanyahu's administration and this campaign in the Gaza Strip, that there are behind the scenes wheelings and dealings and discussions and pressure. We can call it pressure, quote unquote, even though if they really wanted to implement pressure, they could just shut off the financial tap and we'd see things switch around real quickly. But we do have pressure from the Biden administration to find some kind of end from this. I'm sure you guys have seen different discourse about how Israel is in this third phase of their operation. We're seeing some drawdown of troops, the creation of buffer zones, and different aspects like these assassinations, and different new types of military operations are kind of leading, many analysts and experts to suggest that Israel is trying to find some victories, like through these assassinations, through concerted bombing campaigns, because they want to get out, but they have to make it look like they have achieved something with all this, especially from Netanyahu's perspective, who wants to maintain a political career that is likely kaput once he's out, right? So we have all these different elements, and I think this is feeding into the gradually shifting media narrative as well, that they are getting the green light, just like we saw with Ukraine now in the last several months of, start manufacturing that consent for this is going to end, or that this narrative around this needs to shift. Anyway, without rambling anymore, though, we'll jump into this. Again, CNN, pretty surprising. At least 16 cemeteries in Gaza have been desecrated by Israeli forces, satellite imagery and videos reveal. says in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, where fighting escalated earlier this week, Israeli forces destroyed a cemetery, removing bodies in what the IDF told CNN was part of a search for the remains of hostages seized by Hamas during the October 7th terror attacks. So we've had, it said 16 cemeteries desecrated with bodies removed. I just want to point out this excuse they're making is just absolutely hilarious, even by Israeli cartoon propaganda perspective. They desecrated and dug up bodies in a cemetery because they thought some of the hostages would be there. In a war, in a conflict where there's been hostages taken, even though we know that Hamas has seemed to have been a little bit more honorable and respectful to its prisoners during this time, you think they're going to bury them in an actual cemetery at this time during an open conflict zone in this, like I just said, in this area, Khan Yunis, when there's been a lot of fighting? That's just fucking silly. So this is even worse cartoonish propaganda, even by Israeli standards, going on here, guys. Apologies if my computer is skipping out a little bit. I'm having some lag. I've been, like I said in the last episode, it's time to get a new one. I'm hoping to do that soon. CNN has reviewed satellite imagery and social media footage showing the destruction of cemeteries and witnessed it firsthand while traveling with the IDF in a convoy. So they weren't even trying to hide this in front of Western propaganda organ reporters, journalists. Together, the evidence reveals a systemic practice where Israeli ground forces have advanced across the Gaza Strip. And I want to note that this is something that has been going on the last couple of decades, at least, probably since the foundation of Israel, because Israel's foundation, its creation is built on genocide, and that includes cultural genocide. We've seen the different ways in which they try to erase the Palestinian identity, both domestically with their own policies and in the eyes of the world internationally, right? The intentional destruction of religious sites such as cemeteries violates international law. And this is a pretty mild, international crime in comparison to the long laundry list Israel has, right? Except under narrow circumstances, blah, blah, blah. A spokesperson for the IDF could not account for the destruction of the 16 cemeteries CNN provided coordinates for, but said the military sometimes, quote-unquote, has no other choice but to target cemeteries it claimed Hamas uses for military purposes. So again, this one is the classic lie that they're always doing. They did the same thing for the hospitals, all, 36 of them? The IDF said rescuing the hostages and finding and returning their bodies is one of its key missions in Gaza, which is why bodies were removed from grave sites. That's just ridiculous. The hostage identification process conducted at a secure and alternative location ensures optimal professional conditions and respect for the deceased, an IDF spokesperson told CNN, adding that bodies determined not to be those of hostages are returned with dignity and respect. Obviously we don't buy this lie, but I'm really, and I don't think that these are fresh bodies by any means. I mean, maybe they are. I can't say, because maybe in these cemeteries they are doing the mass burials that we've seen images of, obviously. But somehow I don't think that's the case. So I really am curious. What are they doing with these bodies? I don't imagine there being, in these specific ones, I don't know, some sort of humiliation. I couldn't say. If you have any idea what you think it might be for, go ahead and comment, because I'm really curious. But in other cases, the Israeli military appears to have used cemeteries as military outposts. CNN's analysis of satellite imagery in videos showed that Israeli bulldozers turned multiple cemeteries into staging grounds, leveling large swathes and erecting berms to fortify their positions. So these berms, if you've seen any of these like jelly bean videos, like short clips of Al-Qassam brigades that the Al-Qassam brigades have been putting out, it's kind of from their propaganda wing of the different ways they're continuing to fight this guerrilla war. If you've seen any of those, you may have seen these berms where it's kind of a sign that Israel doesn't feel safe anywhere, even in the areas that they're claiming to have occupied and have under control. because their tanks are getting hit, their armored vehicles are getting hit from every imaginable direction. So one of the ways they've been trying to protect their armor is by putting these big dirt and cement and sand berms on every side of it, so that you're kind of protecting its more vulnerable areas from being hit, right? And on that note, I want to point out that I believe that's probably one reason why they're desecrating these cemeteries, and as it says here, using them as military bases. One, it is to perpetuate a cultural genocide. They're trying to turn, like they have said, officials have said, turn Gaza into a parking strip. And we've actually seen instances in either the West Bank or historically 48 Palestine, where Palestinian gravesites were actually bulldozed and desecrated and then turned into literal parking lots. And so I imagine that's part of what this process is, why they're doing the carpet bombing. You have elements in the Israeli regime that really think they're actually going to be able to get all the Palestinians out. We could have a conversation about that at a different time. But one reason why they are doing this, I feel, and I cannot quote this, is they feel that these cemeteries are safe for military outposts, because I believe they assume, maybe rightfully so, that Hamas would not have tunnels and things under it, or would not dig up from the tunnel system through these graves for fear of desecrating the bodies and desecrating the grave sites, and the idea that the Muslim population of Palestinians wouldn't want to do that. And that could be accurate, but that was something that occurred to me. In the Sajia neighborhood of Gaza City, Israeli military vehicles could be seen where the cemetery once stood. So you can see these images here of all this being bulldozed. Pretty crazy. It's like a actual full-scale demolition of the thing. It's not like, oh, there's some combat, or, oh, we passed through and some damage happened. That's part of a war, I imagine. But this is like, we're getting rid of all of this. On December 18th, the IDF published an undated photo of what they said was a Hamas rocket launcher on the grounds of the Sajia cemetery. CNN could not independently verify when or where the photo was taken. So that is another, okay, two things. The rocket, you see a lot of this stuff with Israeli propaganda. Obviously, this is probably nothing new to you guys of understanding this. But I'm sorry to tell you, if you're a defender of Israel, or if you're an Israeli official, showing us pictures of weapons or whatever in an area is not the fucking smoking gun that you think it is. Okay? Because you could take a weapon from anywhere at any time and put it there and then do a picture, like we saw when they took all those civilian hostages on the street, where they stripped them naked in the last episode we talked about, and they had them hand in the guns while they're already naked. Stupid. This is not the smoking gun you think it is, right? But again, pointing out, CNN said, could not independently verify when or where the photo was taken. Again, this is another inkling, and I've seen this in other articles doing my research. CNN is slowly drip feeding, partiality, or the switching of the narrative that maybe full-fledged support for Israel, and more particular, support for Israel is not under siege or under attack, but support for Israel's actions in this particular Israeli regime right now is, right? So another shift there. Going on here. International law experts say the desecration of burial grounds contravenes the Rome Statute, the 1998 treaty that established and governs the International Criminal Court to abdicate war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and crimes of aggression. Israel, which originally supported the creation of the court, did not ratify the Rome Statute. I'm curious if there is also similar statutes for the actual UN through the ICJ. South Africa raised the IDF's destruction of graveyards in Gaza as part of its case at the International Court of Justice, arguing Israel is committing genocide. Israel denies the allegation, but Dill said that while the destruction of cemeteries alone does not amount to genocide, it can add to evidence of Israel's intent. There's huge symbolic meaning to the notion that not even the dead are left in peace. Thus the title of our episode today. it's pretty, again, like he said, symbolic. It's pretty horrifying that even dead Palestinians are not allowed to rest in peace. And, this destruction of grave sites and religious sites is a core process of genocide, of apartheid, of colonization, generally speaking. If you go back to the Standing Rock actions, which I played a small role participating in, I'm very proud to say that I did stand in solidarity in that way. That's what a big part of this was about, was they were, in order to build this pipeline and do construction around it and all this stuff, they were tearing up indigenous, Native American, Indian burial grounds, right? This is part and parcel to the colonial project. And it's just horrifying. I mean, imagine if, imagine if Palestinians, terrorist Palestinians, came and ripped up Arlington National Cemetery or some shit. Imagine the outrage. Imagine what that would be as a cultural statement to this society, right? And another point I want to point out of this is the double standard, because on a number of levels, because we talk about colonization, like I was just saying, this whole lecture. This kind of destruction is part and parcel of the colonial project. But then you'll see the United States and stuff decry, the destruction of historical and archaeological sites in West Asia or in Persian regions by ISIS during that time period. When you look how barbaric ISIS is, destroying these priceless artifacts of their own history, the savages, the barbarians, the cultish, whatever. And yes, ISIS very much is so that, although it is, of course, partially funded and created by the United States government, just like all those other different groups in the region like that. But the double standard, and then they just turn a blind eye to Israel doing the same exact thing, right? Just wanted to point that out. But in at least 2 cases, it is clear pains have been taken to respect the dead at cemeteries where Palestinians aren't buried. Just a half-mile away from the destroyed Al-Tufa Cemetery east of Gaza City, a cemetery holding the bodies of mostly British and Australian soldiers who died in World War I and II, stands largely intact. A crater on the burial grounds appears in satellite imagery between October 8th and October 15th, but has otherwise been untouched. A second cemetery administered by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission in central Gaza offers an even starker example. Mangled vehicles and destroyed roads lay all around the cemetery, but the graveyard itself, which contains the graves of mostly Christian and some Jewish soldiers from World War I, is intact. So it is very clearly racist and cultural genocide and destruction that is one of the key points of this process. What is happening is a clear violation of these basic rules and considered a war crime of committing outrages upon personal dignity under the Rome Statute. There we have that, guys. 16 cemeteries destroyed, and clear dichotomy between what happens with Israeli cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, as compared to happens to Muslim or Arab Palestinian cemeteries. Just wanted to point that out to you guys and do a little more analysis on it, of how it ties into the greater colonial project in general, historically speaking, because I'm sure you guys have heard some of that story, but maybe haven't had some deeper discussion on it. All right, see if we can get this next article to load here, guys. Give me 1 second. All right, so this next article is from Al Jazeera, has been an indispensable source during this period. Says how Israel has destroyed Gaza schools and universities. Hundreds of schools, including those run by the UN in the besieged Palestinian enclave, have been bombed and students and teachers killed in more than 100 days of Israeli bombardment. More than 40% of schools, 288 in Gaza, are run by the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA. And with this, guys, we've also seen the United States, as a result of South Africa's filing of genocide, Israeli genocide in the ICJ, we have seen, I believe, the United States pull its funding obligation from UNRWA, right? Which is just horrible. I I know there are elements in the Biden administration and the State Department. You know, we always talk about how things aren't unified, right? They're not the ruling class isn't always unified in Israel or in the United States. You know, in Israel, you have elements that want to draw down this war because they realize it's unwinnable. But then you have real fanatical elements that want to escalate it even further. And like we talked about in previous episodes, one of the best ways that they think to do that is to, you know, poke the bear of Iran, so that the U.S. gets drawn into it, and we have a huge U.S. presence here, so that they can escalate it in all these different ways and have complete and absolute support from the United States no matter what. Similarly, things happen in the U.S. administration. We have elements that want to draw this down, but then we have elements in the State Department that also want that war with Iran. They want the wider war, and they are, you know, the people doing this, doubling down, because this could have been a real opportunity to start the process from officials in the State Department to, you know, manufacture consent for a drawdown. And you wouldn't even have to manufacture that much consent, because this a ceasefire, a drawdown is popular. But this is just another aspect of this, you know. And going on with this discussion, you know, Israel doesn't give a shit. It's not even just Palestinian Authority ran schools. It's schools ran by the United Nations. Obviously, we know that the United Nations, more UN staff has been killed in Gaza during this conflict than at any other time in the history of the organization. Going on here, says up to 280 government schools and 65 UNRWA-run schools have been destroyed or damaged. 90% of Palestinian Authority schools have been subject to direct or indirect damage. 90%. About 29% of school buildings are out of service after being demolished or severely damaged. Save the Children's Director for Palestine, Jason Lee, said in October, attacks on civilian infrastructure, including schools and hospitals where children are seeking refuge, are beyond unconscionable. This war is eroding humanity and is spiraling out of control. It is the same story with private schools. It was a painful first month because schools were directly targeted. This is from an NGO. A non-partial objective NGO focused on children, you know, everywhere for different regions. You know, this isn't a Hamas propaganda wing or whatever the fuck, right? Israel has attacked multiple schools serving as shelters, killing displaced Palestinians. In November 2023, Israeli forces attacked the UNRWA-run Al-Fakura school, killing at least 15 people. A week after that, at least 25 people were killed in Al-Barak school. In December 2023, several were killed in attacks on Shadia Abu Ghazala school. Why every university in Gaza destroyed? It's not just schools that have borne the brunt of the Israeli onslaught. Centers of higher education, including university, have been completely paralyzed. Palestinian news agency Wafa reported that 12 higher education institutions in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed, completely disrupting university education. Geneva-based independent Euramed Human Rights Monitor said the Israeli systematically destroyed every university in Gaza in stages. The first stage including the bombing of the Islamic Al-Azhar universities, the Monitor said in a statement issued on Saturday. And we have this image here. Literally every university in Gaza has been destroyed. Every hospital has been destroyed in Palestine. This is a genocide. Quite clearly it's a genocide with the hospital, but we're not going to talk about that as from the cultural lens. They are destroying schools for children from 5, K to 12 type situation. They're destroying higher education. And we have also seen, and we'll talk about this when we discuss some of the artists killed, experts, thinkers, speakers, political leaders being actively targeted even by drones or different types of bombings. They are trying to kill all the technical experts, all the people with knowledge, all the thinkers and speakers, and then they're trying to destroy the institutions that made them so that there cannot be more made. It's horrifying, guys. Tell me this is not a genocide. Isra University, located in the south of Gaza City, was demolished by Israeli forces, as evident from a video released by Israeli media on January 17th. The university authority said Israel occupied it and used the campus as a military base, another war crime, another crime against humanity, and detention facility for months before destroying it. I'm going to roll this little video here for you guys, showing this if you have not seen it, purposefully doing a demolition. Here we go.
It looks like a controlled demolition. It looks like what we do here in this country when we're taking down an old hotel or a stadium.
Just real quick, guys. So with this is, God, I guess I don't know if it's a journalist or some kind of official. Sorry, I kind of dropped the ball on that. But talking with, one of the PR officials from the administration, and just the way they try to throw flack for Israel, it's embarrassment, man. I know you guys have seen a lot of this. But
and you have nothing to say? You have nothing to say about this? To do that kind of an explosion, you need to be in there. You have to put the explosives down, and it takes a lot of planning.
This guy doesn't even look like a
preparation to do. And if there was a threat,
he looks like a human
from
produced in a factory.
Particular facility, they wouldn't have been able to do it.
So I have seen the video. I can tell you that it is something we are raising with the governor of Israel, as we often do when we see
raising as
when we see to ask questions and find out what the underlying situation is, as we often do when we see reports of this nature. But I'm not able to characterize the actual facts on the ground before hearing that response.
But you saw the video.
I did see the video. I don't know what was.
It looks like a bridge being imploded.
I don't know what was under that building. I don't know what was inside.
But it doesn't matter what was under the building, because they obviously got in there to put the explosives down to do it in the way that they did.
Again, I'm glad you have factual certainty about it. I just don't.
I don't. All I have is what I saw in the video.
I just
right?
don't.
And I think you guys saw it too.
But I can say we did see it, and I can say that we have raised it with the government of Israel.
And it's not troubling to you?
We are always troubled by any degradation of civilian infrastructure in Gaza, but without knowing the actual underlying circumstances, I'm a little hesitant, I think for reasons that should be understandable, to pass definitive judgment on it from this podium.
Yeah, just horrifying, guys. And imagine your whole job just to lie to every motherfucker that asks you questions and to run flag for a fucking genocide. If there is a hell, he gonna have a real special place in it, Going on here, guys. Additionally, the Israeli army has killed 94 university professors, Euromed Human Rights Monitor said. The Monitor deemed the Israeli destruction of schools as an intentional destruction of Palestinian culture and historical properties. The targeted academics studied and taught across a variety of academic disciplines, and many of their ideas served as cornerstones of academic research in the Gaza Strip. Euromed said that it would be very difficult to return to academics post-war in the wake of the sheer scale of destruction of life and properties. Palestinians have one of the highest literacy rates in the world, according to Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics 2018. Palestinian graduates have ended up performing high in fields such as mathematics, engineering, and business. And I just want to point this out as a testament to the willpower and ingenuity and just fucking amazingness of the Palestinian people, that they have one of the highest literacy rates in the world under active occupation in an open air concentration camp. Wow. Sometimes I'm sure all of us like to make excuses for ourselves and not to be one of these influencer, inspiration type dudes, but if you're ever having a hard time in life reaching your goals or achieving what you set out to achieve, or even getting out of bed in the morning, damn, Palestine put us to shame, Anyway, up to 4,327 students have been killed and 7,819 others have been injured. 231 teachers and administrators have also been killed. Crazy. Some imagery there for you. And then I have this here. They kind of talk a little bit about e-learning, which is just fucking laughable. Meanwhile, schools and universities like trying to implement e-learning when they don't even have food to eat or medicine. in the occupied West Bank are already shifting to e-learning model and online classes as raids and settler violence have dramatically risen since October 7th. This includes 55 schools located in West Bank's seam zone, an area separated from the rest of the occupied West Bank by Israel's separation wall. Okay, yeah, so there we have another instance of Israel committing a cultural genocide. Cultural genocide. And I love how in the past, we discussed the genocide China's perpetuating against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Despite all these different statistics showing a rise in infrastructure, a rise in quality of living, evidence that the central government of the PRC has dumped, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into the development of cultural organizations and buildings and etc., like mosques in the Muslim-dominated region, autonomous region of Xinjiang. But once the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights did a tour there and said that, there are human rights abuses, but this isn't a genocide. Then we saw Washington, the State Department, shift its narrative a little bit. Oh, it's a cultural genocide. Cultural genocide. Again, the duplicity, the dichotomy of them saying there's this cultural genocide in Xinjiang when there's a clear-ass, full-ass genocide in cultural genocide, destruction of schools, killing of professors, killing of teachers, killing of artists, destruction of religious sites and cemeteries in Gaza, in Palestine, and then they run all this flack for it. It's just laughable. So anytime you hear anything anti-China, anti-Iran, anti-Russia, anti-anybody out of the U.S. State Department, out of the U.S. officials, tell them to stick a fucking sock down their throat. Fuck off with this shit. Going on here, guys. We'll try to do this quickly because we're going over our time. I've been trying to do these videos shorter, but it's tough sometimes. Cultural genocide. Israel has wiped out a golden generation of Gaza's artists, musicians, actors, and writers. This is from the New Arab. And I wanted to highlight this again to bring back to the individual human causes. These aren't statistics. These aren't numbers. These are human beings. And in some cases, as in this case, some of the most brilliant and beautiful human beings that our species has to offer being destroyed in this hell, right? Not long ago, the artistic community of Gaza formed a vital element of Palestinian society and vibrant reflection of its resilience. Today, they are struggling to exist. Israel's genocidal assault has wiped out a generation of artists from the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Ministry of Culture revealed the statistic that Israel's brutal and indiscriminate bombardment has led to the deaths of 28 Palestinian artists and intellectuals. And I don't even think that's an accurate number. I think it's way more because, for instance, we saw 95 professors killed. How many of them were also artists? How many artists are lesser known? How many artists weren't necessarily killed in the bombardment but were assassinated? You can go back and read about this over time. But we're going to get into some of the names of these people and see their faces and some of the art that they did. Apologies if I mispronounced the names. I am a stupid-ass Westerner living in the Imperial Core. I am maybe a bit more refined than some of my peers in rural-ass Iowa, but that ain't saying much, and I apologize ahead of time. Hiba Zakut, visual artist and teacher of fine arts. Hiba Ghazi Ibrahim Zakut, 39 years old, was killed on 13th October with her son. Zakut was a fine arts graduate from Al-Aqsa University in Gaza. Many of her paintings were done in acrylics and depicted women, the Palestinian homeland, and nature. Her paintings emphasized Palestinian identity and existence with bright, joyful landscapes, often filled with mosques and churches, minarets, and domes. Here's some images of her art. Beautiful, colorful, vibrant, like it said, in the face of extreme poverty, not holding back despite the pain that I'm sure she went through, the pain of living under occupation, the horrors she must have seen, still keeping this beauty for her homeland and her people. Amazing. She is now dead. Hiba Abu Nada, author, poet, and teacher Hiba Abu Nada, 32 years old, was killed also alongside her son in an Israeli air raid on Khan Yunis. Her novel, Oxygen is Not for the Dead, won second place in the Saharja Award for Arab Creativity in 2017. And this is her last tweet. You can see her here. In her last tweet posted on 8th October, she wrote in Arabic, "Gaza's night is dark apart from the glow of rockets. quiet apart from the sound of the bombs, terrifying apart from the comfort of prayer, black apart from the light of martyrs. Good night, Gaza. I'm going to try not to cry with some of this, guys, because I have a soft spot for art myself. I'm a writer myself, and some of this just really drove it home for me, guys. So if I get a little teary-eyed and stuff, please be patient with me. Omar Abu Shawush, likewise poet, novelist, and social activist. Omar was martyred on 7th October, the bombardment of Nusrat refugee camp in Gaza, where he was born and lived. Abu Shawush was known for his concern for issues affecting the youth and participating in several youth associations. Inas Sakah was a well-known actress, playwright, and teacher who specialized in children's theater. She was killed in an Israeli air raid at the end of October with her 3 children, Sarah, Lean, and Ibrahim. Sakah was one of the most influential and prominent figures on the theater scene in Gaza and a pioneer of creative arts for children in the Strip, organizing many summer theater troupes. Yusuf Dawas, Palestinian musician, writer, journalist, photographer, and aspiring psychoanalyst, 20 years old, was killed in an Israeli airstrike on his family home in northern Gaza. Dawas was fluent in Arabic and English, both writing and speaking, and wrote articles which dealt with a wide range of topics. Mohammed Orakia, aged just 24, innovative cartoonist, artist, photographer, volunteer, activist, was killed on 17th October, one of around 500 victims who were killed at the Al-Ali Arab Hospital. Even in his final days, alongside others seeking refuge in the hospital compound, Orakia strived to lighten the tense atmosphere and alleviate the terror and anxiety consuming the children and injured at Al-Ali Arab Hospital, where he was, using his artistic skills and infectious energy, which he called trying to give psychological first aid to the children and families. In a video in one of his final Instagram posts, he can be seen in the center of a circle of children in the courtyard of the hospital, keeping them entertained to distract their psychological stress and trauma they are under. Nuruddin Hajjaj, young writer Nuruddin Hajjaj, 27, was martyred in an Israeli airstrike on his home in Sujaiya neighborhood. He composed the play The Gray Ones and the novel Wings That Do Not Fly in 2021. He was also an active participant in initiatives like Cordoba Association and Days Theater. His last message to the outside world was, "My name is Nur al-Din Hajjaj. I am a Palestinian writer. I am 27 years old and I have many dreams. I am not a number and I do not consent to my death being passing news. Say too that I love life, happiness, freedom, children's laughter, the sea, coffee, writing. Feiruz, everything that is joyful, though these things will all disappear in the space of a moment." So yeah, some, more human stories for you guys of what imperialism, capitalism, war, apartheid takes from us. They're not just numbers, they're people. And the ripple effects that this has is, beyond even our comprehension. War, and these things affect us in ways we don't even understand. Obviously, we were talking about all these artists destroyed. This is a genocide. This is a war on humanity, not just on Palestinians. And, just to give you a perspective in my own personal life, who has never lived through a war or seen a war. I've had guns pointed at me plenty of times by cops, but I've never been shot at, but give you an idea of how war affects us. My great-grandfather died in Korea, right? And that was an imperialist war. He was on the wrong side of that war, obviously, but he did 2 tours over there. He died on the second tour, and his death completely destroyed my great-grandmother for a period. And she turned to drinking pretty hard and ended up abusing my grandmother, who ended up raising me later in life. And that traumatized her deeply. And so in turn, she turned to drinking and then in turn abused her children, who some of them, my dad, ended up turning to drugs, which then in turn impacted my whole life, you know? And I sometimes wonder if Paul, my great-grandfather, hadn't have died in that senseless imperialist war, colonial war, what the history of my family might have been like, how it might have been different. You know, so imagine what these wars do, the ripples effects it has throughout history, throughout family histories, throughout life. But anyway, guys, that's all I have here for you. I'm going on a tangent. I apologize. But just more instances of Israeli crimes against humanity, clear cultural genocide being implemented by the Israeli regime on the Palestinian people. But we're going to go ahead and tie this off here, guys. You know, if you want to support my independent media work, can't talk. I'm still tearing it up a little bit, guys. I'm sorry. If you want to support my independent media work, you can do so at patreon.com/entitledmillennials. You can do that for $1 a month. I hope you'll join me on there. I don't post as much on there as I should. I apologize, but your support means a lot. You can also support our independent media work with one-time donations through PayPal, paypal.me/entitledmillennials. You guys have really helped me with that in the past. Appreciate it. Otherwise, like, subscribe, comment, help the algorithm, share it to your friends. Thank you to everyone that's been continuing to support this show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But as always, guys, great hanging out with you. Love talking the issues with you. And I hope to speak with you again real soon. Bye-bye for now.